All my life, I heard from mom and dad, you're going to college. And so I enrolled in Washtenaw Community College. And after a year and a half, I flunked out. Okay, so I thought, okay, and you know what? What about if I joined the Air Force? So I went to my recruiter, took the aptitude test, and he told me when the results came back, if you enlist, you will be given a job doing something to do with electronics. I thought, oh, I like, I like that. Okay, so I listed and so got in line. So it was March when I reported to March of 1969 when I reported to Fort Wayne in Detroit and raised my right hand, giving the oath. In the Air Force, there was opportunities to learn, and then talking with the recruiter, I found out about some of those. And I liked that. I knew that it was going to be in electronics, and I really liked that idea. But the fact of the conflict in Southeast Asia was really kind of distant from me. I knew that it was something that was a very kinetic, and but it didn't bother me at all. I was more than willing to contribute whatever I could. I received orders out of basic training to become an aerospace camera repairman. Aerospace, that of course is the distance between the dirt and the exoatmosphere. And so it was aircraft cameras. Now, there were two divisions within that. There was combat documentation and there's reconnaissance. So there was two divisions within that, and the tech school addressed both. And so then when you get your orders, you go to some base to pursue one of those avenues. And my orders came out for Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, where we had the 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, F-106 Delta Darts. Um, so that's where I began my on-the-job training.
And then when did you arrive in Udorn?
I've received orders within 6 months to leave North Dakota and go to Udorn. Let's see, well, I left in May. So I don't know, received orders in February, March, something like that. So I arrived in June, very late June 1970.
1970 in
Yeah.
Udorn. And how long were you in Southeast Asia? It sounds like it was more than a year.
It was. It was. I liked being in Thailand. Did not have any daily assemblies. Did not have any buffing of the floors and stuff like. I had Thai nationals that did all that. We had Thai nationals that did our laundry, made our beds for us at the shop. I kept the floor buff and all that. I like that. I really like that.
All right.
Uh, so I extended for a year.
Oh wow. Okay. So you were there
Yes.
for 2 years then, a 2 year tour?
Nearly 2 years. I did leave early. In 72, it was I think it was March or May. So I left a couple months early. They were winding down and they decided that I could go.
You arrive in 1970 and you're there until 1972. And as you said, the war is winding down.
Mhm.
Through your time in Thailand, was it apparent to you that the war was winding down? Did the tempo of work kind of slow down? Could you tell just
I
from the
could
way
not.
things felt, just from the pace of things that the war was winding down?
No, no, we had no idea. Um, we had our about 3 a.m. each day. Somebody had to go to Strike and Tell and pick up the day's list of sorties, so our crew would know what craft to upload with film and what craft are going to have to be downloaded and that type of thing. And I don't recall. any frequency changes in that list. Um, however, because I was more technically astute than most of my associates, I was assigned to the bench. I spent most of my time on the bench. So I was the one that did most of the actual repair. And that's why, well, I was asked, would you like to go to Da Nang? It's because a 601st wide message went out. Do any of you detachments have somebody that you would be willing to send to Da Nang for a month? And so I was asked, hey, Wes, would you like to go to Da Nang for a month? And I knew, I had some tech, technoese knowledge that was just simply not. I was the one who who really knew these systems. And so so yeah, I was picked and I was glad to go.
So first, describe just generally what your work involved in Thailand and then what it was that you did in Da Nang. What did
Okay.
your work basically involve in Thailand?
Well, my first few months, I was just simply going up the flight line, downloading film, uploading film, just like the rest of the crew. And we had a 24-hour operation in our shop. So we had different shifts. And I don't think there was much to happen out on the flight line during daylight hours, as I recall. Well, we had nighttime hours, we go and pick up our sortie list for the day. I think it was like about 3 a.m. or something like that. Someone had to go every morning. Um, so, uh, but then it became the management, so to say, became aware that I really knew the operation of these systems, and I was anxious to work the bench, so they assigned me permanently to the bench. And I only went out to the flight line on occasion. But there was one special time they wanted to have a gun camera, and none of the craft were prepared for that. So they wanted to have something or they where they could have a gun camera mount. And we did have gun cameras, but we didn't have anything mounted for the Phantoms. And I'm thinking back a lot of years. But anyway, I was asked to go out there and see if I could rig up something. So the crew chief allowed me in the cockpit, look around. I came up with some ideas, and I came up with a button mounted on the stick. The pilot would push the button, and he would get his 16 millimeter motion film. So that was a special operation. I don't know what the results, whatever came of that. You know.
And this is
Yeah.
what you're describing right now. This is what you did in Da Nang.
No, no. Okay, in Da Nang, yeah, yeah, yes and no. In Da Nang, their shop was a shambles. Okay, we had a camera pod test device that all the detachments had. We learned about it in tech school, but somebody decided they were going to, maybe they didn't understand it was not usable. So when I walked into my shop and I saw that right away. So I could tell that's why I'm here. So I rewired that thing so it was up to the factory specs, and then they could begin using it again. And then leaving, I didn't have any orders to leave. My month was up. I went to the flight line, and the Vietnamese girl behind the bench said, "Well, you don't have orders going." I said, "Well, here's my order. Say I'm only here for 30 days." So she accepted that. I was happy to serve, and especially so because I really felt like I had knowledge that was being useful.
How so?
Well, like I was the one that was asked to go out to the flight line and install a special configuration, something that was out of the norm.
Mm.
Right? I can tell you, any of the other guys, they would have kind of drawn a blank. They were there to have a lot of fun, to do their job. Okay, upload film, download film, and that's probably why they had the problems they had in Da Nang, because apparently they didn't have anybody who really, you know, knew what was going on from a
Mm,
technical perspective. I'm speculating though.
sure. Um, well, and this is a real general question just for folks who don't know. Um, so you're involved in repairing these cameras and you know, setting up this camera, it sounds like, so uh, certain types of photographs can be taken. What is the value in the, you know, as the war is being prosecuted, so far as you understood it at the time, what was the value of these photographs? You know, what
Strike and tell.
photographs can be used for?
Strike and tell. We all knew that. We most of the
Strike
eh,
intelligence, you say?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, strike intelligence. We call it strike and tell. I don't know, but we had a pod camera mounted in the, well, I guess you call it starboard hard point. That was a whole system where some other type of munitions could otherwise be installed. We had a camera of 70 millimeter panoramic camera mounted in there. And so it had glass that was like that so that the camera could see horizon to horizon, and there was a rotating prism on there that would paint a picture. So there was a slit that the film would pass through. The film passed through with continuous motion, but it painted still pictures on that film, 180 degrees. So presumably, the craft would drop its ordnance and do the escape thing. Okay, and so the camera could still document that the results of that ordnance drop.
For damage assessment and right. Did we hit the
Mm.
convoy, the NBA convoy or
Yeah,
something like that that we were
yeah,
going?
yeah. A
Yeah.
70 millimeter film had a lot of resolution. So, when the film, anyone sorties footage was downloaded, comes into the shop, and we had a device for developing the film. I didn't usually do that. That was something that is just like a wham bam, do this, do that, and the film comes out, and then somebody would run it over to Strike Intel.
In either place, did you know that you're involved in a war? Did it feel more just sort of like a regular job, or did you have a strong
Yeah.
sense that you were, you know, that you were actively involved in a war?
We were isolated from that in a sense because we never saw the results of munitions being spent.
But
Mhm.
there is an exception, right? Isn't there something that happens in Da Nang that does kind of bring the war home to you?
Yes, yes, yeah. The I had arrived either July 3rd or July 4th. I don't remember now with absolute certainty. But that night, it was about midnight. I sat down to write a letter to my mom and dad. Hey, mom and dad, I've gone to Da Nang, Vietnam for 30 days. So just wanted to let you know. Um, and I believe then that going after midnight, it was actually July 4th at 12:15 a.m. that as I was sealing the envelope, I heard the sirens go off. And it wasn't more than a few seconds before I heard and I knew enough. He hit the floor. I knew enough about that because we had sandbags around all the barracks, so you had at least some type of protection. But one of those Chinese rockets, incendiary rockets, it hit a barracks, and if you could see the flames, um, I had, I'd put on a flak jacket, and everybody, whenever there's an event like you put on a flak jacket, and then there was the siren, all's clear, and I got up and I walked outside, and everybody else was just standing around watching these flames going up. It had to be going up 100 feet. It had to, and it was like a torch going straight up.
Did you go by to did you go and see the barracks or did you keep
I
your
walked past it, yes. The next day, on my way to my trailer where I did all of my work, I had to walk directly in front of it. And there was a crew carefully going through all the remains with rakes. You could see they were very dedicated. They didn't know what was going on around them. Their eyes were fixed on all those ashes, and they were using their rakes, slowly going through all the remains.
Did that event really bring home the war to you? You know
No, no,
you're
it
a war
didn't.
the whole time. It's
It
still
did. It did not. It did not. I didn't feel like I was in a war zone. Yeah, I was getting that extra, what was $150 a month pay because I was in a war zone, but I didn't. Uh, I mean, that thing could have easily landed on my barracks. It could have, because it was just a random thing. Most of those things, when they went off, they just hit at random places. Oftentimes, no damage at all, didn't really have any effect because they were launched from miles away, as I understand it.
right.
Yeah.
Huh, so it didn't really register at the time.
No, no, it didn't like degrade my ability to focus on my job or anything like that. The war still seemed kind of distant to me. I did have a documented exposure to Agent Orange in Thailand. I went into the VA service rep after I had my prostate cancer diagnosis. And so I gave her my DD form 214. She looked at it and said, uh, she didn't say it, but the word was, yeah, you're in. You're going to get the benefit because the form 214 documented that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Why were they using Agent Orange in Thailand?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think they acknowledged it. They sprayed the base perimeter, and I remember there was a spray truck that would go along that sprayed the perimeter. That must have been the Agent Orange. It had huge block letters on the side of it. It said Pedro. And that's what we call the mosquito there, because the Thai mosquitoes were huge. If you saw one on the wall and you swatted it, you need to get a Kim wipe or a paper towel to clean the blood off your hands, because they were huge, and we called them Pedro. We thought they were spraying for insecticide stuff, So and our hooch was on the base perimeter. We could watch out into the fields. There were water buffalo working the fields there, watch that. And in fact, somehow I guess I was able to go out there because I have a photograph of myself riding two water buffalo roaming.